Hey, welcome to the blog. Today it's flying wires and tail feathers, which turned out to be pretty challenging and awesome at the same time. So I want to show you what I've been working on, tell you how I've done it. I'm open to all of your comments. Love to hear how you may have done it differently. Be kind in the comments. That's my one rule or request. But let's just kind of start here. So I want to transition over to the airplane. So there it is. Those are my flying wires and tail feathers, and they are all on. And let me just tell you what I ended up doing. So, one of the first things that I did, I set my angle of incidence. I got that all set, kind of communicated with Steve Henry a few times on that. Once I was comfortable with the degree it was set at, which is a number he told me slightly different than 0. I'll let you talk to him about that. I actually followed his advice, and so it's all set. Plane was leveled, and everything was good to go there. I basically put my my secure bolts through, and these actually hold the travel struts. So this connects to the jury travel component so that it is stable. And now that pretty much locked me in. You'll notice I've got some tape in a bunch of different places. Initially, this tape here was just here to kind of hold the back piece. When you start putting it on, it kind of wants to slide open when you clean it really good. So I just used a little bit of a tension there to hold that in there so I had everything tight. Then there's the process of making sure that you're square. And, I've seen some pretty cool stuff where people have built, a complete wood frame and then clamped everything into the frame. So I followed the instructions, essentially got it all clamped up, and I made sure that I have a mark here. And that coincides with a mark right here, which is measured over. And then I've done the same thing. I've got my mark right here, same measurement to this little mark right there. And that coincides with my mark up here at the top that you can see. And so what I did is I got myself squared up, and I also used a square to square. But I'd make my measurement to here, then I'd make my measurement from here down to here, and I would make sure first that I had everything square. And so you're going to start with your front flying wire, and if you get the stainless steel tabs, and I wrote on them, so when if I take this off, when I do, I can bag these up and put them in the correct bag so I don't mix them up. I've got my front. You start with your front, so I did my fronts and I did my backs. I made sure that I've got tension, and each time, at each step, I would just basically go from my measurement again, back down here. I probably measured this 100 times, just to make sure that I had a good solid measurement. And then I would do the same thing. So let me kind of tell you what I did. So when you initially, when you make your flying wires, I found this to be easiest for me. I basically would take this over to the table, and I would make up this first one. So I would, put it all together, give myself, you can see I've got a piece, kind of comes out to about right there. I'd put my shrink wrap on, put the sleeves on, put the thimble on, get it in my compression tool, and then compress it down, and then I'd shrink wrap this right here. So now I have one piece already made. So then you're going to come down, and I had pre-measured my wire. So each one of these wires I pre-measured so that I knew that when I got to here, after making the top component, that I would have plenty of room to come back. So what I did then is you basically take and I'd put it all together, and then I would pull it tight. So I'd leave myself enough, tag out here that I could grip it and pull it really tight so I had a good snug tautness. And then I would just mark it right at the sleeve with a Sharpie, good and tight. Then I would basically undo my bolt, take this whole piece off, go over to the table, and then when I got it over to the table, I would line those two marks up and put it in my compression device, crank it down, set the sleeve, and then I'm going to slide my shrink wrap down, which, I had two different sizes, slid it down, and then shrunk wrap it, got it shrinked on there. So it's nice, and this does not come, by the way. The shrink wrap does not come with your kit. You need to order it or buy it, and you need to use the high grade shrink wrap that has heat activated adhesive on the inside. So make a note of that. You might as well get a couple kits of it. It's cheap. And then I just shrunk it down. Then you're going to come up, put it in the same hole, and when you start putting your nuts and washers on, I mean, it'll have some decent tension. And then what I would do is once I did both sides, check my measurement again. I'd make sure that my measurement was the same, and then I would check over here. So you're going to do your fronts, come around, and then starting on the bottom. And then the key is to make sure that each time you do it, your measurement has not changed. So I'm making sure my measurement over and over has not changed, that I'm not pulling it up out of square. So that was the tricky part. The bottom is more tricky, and in some ways it's easier. Let me just show you. So you do the same thing. You'll make your bracket your first one on the bench. Piece of cake, just like I showed you. Then you're going to come down here, and you're going to basically, I put it in this piece, I put the sleeve in, and I slid it through, I run it up, I grabbed it, pulled it through so that I had enough tag line to here, and then that's where I cut, so that I had a couple of inches extra, and I knew, all right, so I've got my couple of inches extra. Then I come down, and you basically, what I did is I slid my compression sleeve, my thimble, and then I slid a couple of larger pieces of the shrink wrap on both. So when you come down here, now you've got your first one is built, you're going to come down here, you're going to pull tight. So I put the nut in place, everything. You pull it super tight, mark the sleeve with the felt pen again, and then take this piece over to the bench and compress your sleeve against those marks, and then I slide my shrink wrap down, heat it, shrink it, get it all in place so that it's done. And then your final step up here is the very same thing. This you measure, you put it on, you tighten the bolts up, pull it tight. I got it nice and snug right there. It's super tight. I mark it with the felt pen, then I take it all off. Everything goes over to the bench. You do your compression, put your sleeve on, then you come back and I just start at the front. I'd install my front, then I installed my bottom, then I came back here and did my final point. And when you put it on, it should be pretty taut. And then you check your measurement again. So then I came over here and I checked my measurement again, used a square, and I had this clamped down and bracketed down. And I checked my measurements on this side to make sure I didn't pull it out. Then I built my second cable the very same way. And those are my flying wires. And so now when I'm done, there's all my flying wires. They're set. And I've checked my square again. Everything is in square. I get the exact same measurements from the top here to that mark as I do here on my tape measure. Every single time I've put my level on it, made sure it's still the same degree. And so I think I have everything set the way it needs to be. And so that was a time-consuming process. And I'm not going to lie, my fingers, holy cow, they are so sore from the little teeny ends of the cable where it's going to stab the crap out of you. When you're putting everything together, a couple of little quick tips I'll show you on a piece of wire over here that saved me. Once I did the first one, I realized I was battling it. There's a couple things you learn real quick that all of a sudden it speeds the whole process up. And you're not going to find this in the manual. The manual, unfortunately, for the Highlander, especially in some of these areas, is so vague. Sometimes the part numbers are not the correct part numbers. It's dated 2004. It's a different AN3 12A bolt instead of an AN3 11A bolt because you don't have any of those. You'll go back and look at your list and it won't be there, so you've got to call and ask. So there's some things, there's some quick learnings you're going to find that you got to extrapolate. The forums are awesome. So I'm going to show you a couple of tricks. Here we go. Okay, so I want to show you a couple of tricks that I think are going to help you if you're new to this like I am. And so I'm learning the hard way on all of this. You know, when you cut your cable with your cable cutter, you know, all these little teeny strands are going to start to pull out, and holy crap, that's like being stabbed by 1,000 hypodermic needles when you're trying to put stuff on. So you've got your Nico press sleeve right here. I think that's how they say it, Nico press sleeve. and you're putting that on. So sometimes when you cut it, it's not as clean as that. You'll have one or two sticking out. So you're constantly trying to get that to slide on nice and neat. And so then, you know, when you come back the next time and you go to put it on, sometimes it bends one or two out. This one isn't. So then you're going to have your, you got your sleeve right here, and then you're going to put your thimble inside here. So what ends up happening is you're dealing with this wire and you're adjusting it and you're messing, and bonk, that always pops out. And you'll find that as you've got this in, you know, and you're trying to compress it down and compress the sleeve, you're constantly battling. This will pop in and out. So I'm going to show you a little trick. So I take some of the small heat shrink right here, and I'm going to cut off literally, I mean, a 1/4 inch. So just cut a 1/4 inch piece of that off right there. There's my sleeve. So once I have put this through my my sleeve right here, I'm gonna bring her down like so. This is gonna be my loop end, and my thimble's gonna be inside here. I'm basically just gonna take this. I'm gonna put my heat shrink on there. I'm just going to shrink this down right here like that. This has the glue in it. Now what happens is this, when you're messing around, it's not going to pull out of there. So when you're messing around at the airplane, you're trying to get your measurement, you're trying to get things screwed back on, and you've got this all threaded through with your thimble inside there, that keeps it from wanting to slide out. This is also super helpful when you get down and you get everything set. So you're trying to get it set the way you want it to your marks, and you got your sleeve in there, and now you're putting it inside your tool to compress. Sometimes when it gets tight like this, you'll let go, and that'll go whoop, just like that, and boom, flip back out. So then you got to rethread it through. And if you've got those little teeny ends, they are stabbing you to death. And so I also do this. Here's my roll. After I cut, each time I cut, then I just put a little piece on the end. This keeps those strands from wanting to unwind. It's got the glue. And literally, the nice thing about it is you can cut it right at the very edge of that. Bang. Nice and sharp. And then just pop the little piece off. And those strands are actually glued shut because they have a teeny bit of glue on them. And so they don't want to open up at all. And that is going to save your fingers so much pain. And so then what I do is I get it in my device. I basically get everything set. So, you know, I'm leaving my amount of tag I feel comfortable with. I've got it all cinched down. This is compressed. Thimble's in there. It's all compressed down, you know, crushed and set. Then what happens is I've already sitting on my, let's just say sitting on my my piece of cable back here. I just slide up my shrink. And I do two sizes. I basically do this one smaller size, and then I do a slightly larger size. And I'm basically just going to run those up like so. And I'm going to shrink that piece just like that. It makes a super slim, tight fit. It keeps your tag end down. The other ends I left covered. And so you get a really snug, it won't fray, it can't poke through. And I learned that after doing the first one. And so then that gives you a super compressed tight piece that for your flying wire. They look really good. I think they look really nice, and it's glued tight. So remember that. Put a little teeny end on the end, and then do it on your cable end every time you cut. And what I started doing, especially when you're making your long one, I just slid one on the whole roll, and it was down there. So that right when I got ready to cut and I marked, I actually slid it right to where I was. I made my mark on the edge. I slid over it a teeny bit, shrunk it, and cut it. And so essentially what you're doing is you're cutting that right there. Bing. And you don't get any fray on your cable, because sometimes, you guys already know this who've been doing it. If you haven't, you'll cut it. Sometimes it's clean as a whistle and nothing. Other times you'll cut it and it'll go brrr, and it'll puff out. And then you're trying to cut it again, and if it's doing that, it is going to fight you the whole time. When it does that, if you already have a piece of sleeve on here, you can actually slide the sleeve up to the very end, shrink it, cut it, and now it's glued back in place. It works awesome. So That's my flying wire tip that I learned after poking my finger 1,000 times, and it worked out really well. So if you've got any questions, go ahead and fire away. I'll try to answer them. I'm new at this. This is my first build. Remember, I would love it if you would subscribe, share it with your friends, ring the bell so that you get notifications on the next video. I'm going to try to do a lot of these on each component of the airplane. By the time we're done, you'll have seen every mistake I've ever made as I'm building the plane. Just be nice when you could critique me. And if you see something I can do better, put it in the comments, because at the end of the day, like you, I want to build a sweet airplane. So, hey, we'll catch you on the next one.